What's up, you guys? Welcome to Start My... Wow. What's up, you guys? Welcome to Start Somewhere, the podcast. My name is Isabel. I'm your host, and I'm so grateful you chose to click play and listen to today's episode. This is a topic I've been wanting to show and share more about for a very long time, and to be completely honest, I felt somewhat held back and reserved speaking on this topic, and that is because this is about something that is just so special and close to my heart, and it's almost quite like an intimate thing. However, when I really look back at how far I've come in, I want to say such a short amount of time, in how much my emotions have just completely just feel so at ease. I just feel so calm and content and confident. And when I really look back at what it was that got me to this place, it's my spiritual practices. And that is what this episode is going to be all about. My spiritual journey, I'm going to open up, I'm going to share how I started, when I started, what I did, what I didn't do, my mindset at the time. So many things I had to overcome and work through. And when I look back yet again, a big part of what I deem as my success, everybody's definition of success is so different, but my personal definition, which is how much I have achieved in my work and my business, starting my business, all these different projects that I work on, all these collaborations I get to do. That is what I deem as my success in my life. And a big part of how I do it all is what I'm going to shine a light on in today's episode. Before we get started, I'm going to give a warm, loving shout out to my private Facebook group, the Start Somewhere Society. This is an extension of the podcast of Start Somewhere, and this is a community of like-minded people who want to level up emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. This was so much of my life motto and what I wanted to work on, especially on reflection to my spiritual journey. So hear me out here. This is a group for the positive thinker, for the big dreamer, and this is where I share more exclusive content. It's also a community, like who doesn't want to be surrounded by this like-minded aspect? And it's just so important and so powerful. I honestly owe so much of how far I've come, both from what you can see online in my business and also what I feel internally, based on community, based on who I surround myself by. And when we can't find these friends in real life, we go online, we go on social media, we join Facebook groups, we chat to people on Instagram, on other social media platforms, right? So joining this group, this is for like-minded people specifically. So I do know a lot of our podcast listeners are already in the group, so thank you. I thank you guys so much for already being a part of it. But if you're new to the show, or maybe you're not new to the show and you haven't joined the group yet, what are you waiting for? This is something you need to be in. I also share exclusive updates, so you guys are the first ones to know about all the fun, random stuff that happens in my life and what's coming up in my business and XYZ. So this is a space where I show my face a little bit more, I open up a little bit more, and you're surrounded by like-minded people. Like, who doesn't want to be around that? So shout out to our Facebook group, Start Somewhere Society. The link to join will be in the show notes of the podcast episode. So as I shared, this episode is going to be all about my spiritual journey. So before I clicked record, seeing as this is more of a spiritual episode, I actually pulled some oracle cards. So these are where there are affirmations on the cards and they give you an oracle message. And I'm not going to read out exactly what they say because that's kind of boring to you guys. Instead, the messages that came out, this is how I'm going to dictate where this podcast is essentially going to go. So bear with me here. Of course, I have a rough plan of what exactly it is I'm going to share in this episode. I'm going to give you guys an insight as to where I was before embarking on my spiritual journey, I'm going to call it, when it started, and then really giving an insight as to, I guess you could say, the increment. So each year, what that looked like, and then essentially like we're stacking on that and how it's gone from like super basic, 2019, 2020 me, really starting to embark and discover and get really curious about this world. And then moving up to 2021, going through so much shit. And then 2022, just like really at, I want to say, the peak of really uncovering my spiritual abilities, I want to say, and other spiritual practices, and just being so open-minded and such a sponge to so many other ways and modalities and XYZ above. So I'm going to give you like a real step-by-step guide process, I guess you could call it. So that way, no matter where you are at on this journey, maybe you're at the very, very beginning, maybe you're like, nah, I don't like this woo-woo stuff. Although I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, that's not your thing. So we'll cancel that group out of people. Maybe you're halfway through, maybe you're even more advanced and more skilled in the spiritual realm than I am, which probably maybe a lot of you, because I'm not saying I'm like this wizard in spirituality, but it's just so much of what has helped me get me to where I am. And it's so powerful, and I truthfully feel it becoming stronger and stronger every day. And what I mean by this is my connection to the divine. Now, I'm going to use a few words here, interchangeable, and these are going to be universe, spirit, your higher self, your intuition. End of the day, yet again, guys, disclaimer, this is just my assumptions, my reasonings, my definitions, my practices. This is all essentially, yes, the same thing. And also how we can connect to this higher power, right? So actually, side note, I was listening to a podcast this morning, Mindset Mentor. I know actually so many of you guys listen to him as well. And he is so much more of a masculine logical approach to, I guess you could say, a lot of the stuff I talk about. And he actually shone a light on spirituality and called it woo-woo, and he had this whole kind of concept on your higher self, on your intuition. And the thing is, we always have the answers inside of us, no matter what the situation is. When you're saying, I don't know, trust me, when you know, you are actively or subconsciously choosing not to shine awareness as to what that knowing is. Now, hear me out here. The more we can practice and strengthen our spiritual practices, which is what I'm going to share throughout this episode, the more we can tune out the outside world, so all the bullshit, and the more we can tap in, drop in the moment, and listen to what our intuition, our higher self, that voice inside our head, that isn't that anxiety, overthinking voice. It's that calm, soothing voice that knows everything. But you are choosing, conscious or subconsciously, to ignore, to stop listening to that voice. And so we always know what to do. And when we find ourselves saying, I don't know, that's like my biggest pet peeve as well. When I find myself saying, I don't know, I pull myself out of it so quickly, and I know that I'm choosing not to know. And who wants to be stuck, right? When you are stuck, when you are not taking any steps forward, you are not going to be able to quantum leap. You are not going to be able to get anywhere because you're actively choosing to stay stuck, right? And if you're saying stuck, you may as well go backwards. Like a lot of the times I've seen in my journey, I take 1 step forward, 5 steps back, 1 step forward, 4 steps back, 1 step forward, 3 steps back, continue. This was my journey for a long time. And you probably have experienced this. Maybe you're doing this now, or you will experience it. Like we're not always just happy-go-lucky, one step, like smile on, everything's working out. Like, yeah, that's like a beautiful goal to get to, and you can and you will achieve that. However, to get to that place first, we have to be okay with sometimes going backwards, but just not accepting to stay stuck. And this is something I discovered maybe 6 months ago, and I wish I discovered it earlier. I wish I understood how staying stuck is just only doing a disservice to your own growth. It's hindering your own success forward. And the more we can tap in and tune into these spiritual practices and these ways of being and thinking and XYZ, the easier it's going to be to shift our reality to quantum leap. So on that note, let's go back in time. So this would have been when I was quite young as well. This is when I was introduced to the book called The Secret. This is a book all about the law of attraction. I know a lot of you guys actually started out on your spiritual journeys with this book as well. I know one of my friends, she's the same, and I actually got the teen edition. Like that's how of a, I guess, like big kind of book this is. It's also a movie on Netflix. It's all about explaining the law of attraction. It's quite, the Netflix documentary, it's very old-fashioned and very strange, but the book, it makes these concepts so easy to understand and very digestible. So it's obviously a fantastic starter. So this is where I started. I remember, I think my mum gave it to me as well when I was, 14, 15. So this was where my mind was opened and I was like, Our minds can do stuff, right? The law of attraction. Of course, I was young. I didn't know much about life and everything else. So it's not like I was actively manifesting when I was a teenager. Just saw 1111 on the screen. So I always basically knew there was something magic, I want to call it, in this world. Fast forward a few more years, I started to grow up somewhat, started to mature, and I came across the lovely author Gabrielle Bernstein. I've kind of nicknamed her there. So she has a bunch of books as well. The first one that I absolutely adored was called The Universe Has Your Back. And this is a very beginner concept as well, but just so bite-sized and easy to understand if you are at the beginning phases. So I discovered this book, I would have been 20 years old, and this was after my ex-boyfriend and I broke up. And I had gone through my very first breakup. As you can probably imagine, if you've been through a breakup, it's especially your first one, like you think the whole entire world is ending and horrible, horrible times. And so I was going through that and I found this book. And I have little snippets in my memory of being in my bed, reading this book, and just taking so many notes in my journal. And this is probably when I started to journal also. And I was reading this book and I was taking notes and I was just piecing it together. And I was like, our minds can create the reality that we want. If we think positive thoughts, if we do right things, if we come from good intentions, we can essentially dictate how we want our life to be on a super, super, super surface basic level. So I started to get excited. I started to see how we can manifest. And in this book, she teaches and she guides and she shares how to manifest, how the universe supports us, how the universe gives us signs. And I started to have fun with this. I started to play with it. She gave examples of asking for certain signs and seeing it show up in your reality. She gave story examples of this. And I remember clearly doing this as well at one point. I asked to see roses. That was my sign. I don't know. I think my middle name is Rose. I don't know why I thought of roses. And I remember I just journaled about it, and I don't remember the exact specifics, but I just remember it was roses for some reason. And then the next day I was out shopping and I just walked past this 4x4 meter block of fake roses, but roses. And that's when I started to, I saw it and I doubted it. I'm like, nah, that's not real. That doesn't count. But this is the thing. How open are you willing your mind to go? As soon as you start being skeptical and judging and justifying, you're not allowing the universe to work through you. And perhaps you're maybe just not, I'm going to say, ready to be exposed and to be open to this type of being and living. If you're skeptical and think it doesn't count, then unless you want to open your mind and change, I advise you just to stop listening, because this is not going to be the episode for you. So it really is a test on how much you can trust and have faith. So something as well, a side note, a side analogy. When it comes to manifesting, if you're thinking of an elephant and you want to manifest an elephant, it's not going to drop from the sky right in front of your bedroom, right in front of the road, right in front of wherever you are right now. Because if that happens, there's going to be so many other side effects of that shit happening, of an elephant falling from the sky. So instead, the universe is going to deliver it to you when it's, sensible, when it's suitable. So give an example of me with my roses. I wrote down roses. I'm not just going to turn over and see a whole bunch of roses magically appear in the corner of my bedroom. Right? It's going to happen when I'm putting myself out in the world, when I'm leaving my house and I'm going to a new location where I haven't been before, where there may or may not be these roses or whatever it else is you're wanting to manifest. So this isn't Harry Potter magic coming from the sky. This is legitimate stuff. So test your faith and your trust. So I started to, see this work straight up with my roses example. And then what I did, and what I don't recommend people doing, but what I did when I was 20, is I wanted to manifest getting my ex-boyfriend back, right? So as much as I was learning, I've read her book, did the journaling, realized how we can make it work. And I essentially manifested us to come back together, and it worked. And we were together for another 2 years, but then we broke up. So the thing is, why I advise not to manifest a relationship coming back is because that has ended for a reason, and don't meddle with that. If if someone wants to walk away from your life, open the door and push them out faster. Like, don't hold on to them and don't do everything you can to manipulate them to change. If they no longer want to be in your life, open the door, give them a hug, say goodbye. It's going to suck. It's going to be painful, but you don't want to manipulate that energy. You don't want to manipulate them to come back because it's not meant for you. And I'm saying this from past experience. Not that I regret manifesting him back, because clearly it served the biggest purpose ever. I mean, it was another 2 whole years, and I'm not getting into that whole story. But now if I am dating somebody and it ends, or if I have a friendship and it ends, which doesn't actually happen ever. I did a podcast about it recently. I had one friend that went to shit, but that I haven't had that in so many years. And don't manifest people coming back is all I can say, because it's just a waste of your energy. Trust me. So that's some experience. Anyway, the fact I can manifest someone coming back, I'm like, this stuff works. Like, I'm onto something here. So this was still early days. I was still quite young. This was before I kind of really learnt more about self-development and wellness. And I was really just on the brink of stepping into this space. Like, I was just about to enter it. Had just started finding my love and my passion for creating content online and growing my social media, and really getting more into health and wellness living and mindset. And, I really started to kind of get into that, that Isabel that I am right now, which is pretty cool. So this was 2018. So fast forward to 2019. 2019 was worse for me than 2020. It was the biggest year for so much growth and change, and so much of me not listening to my intuition. I completely put a blind eye to my intuition, exactly what I was sharing at the start of this episode. I actively chose to ignore what my intuition was telling me, and oh my God, did it do me so much more harm than good. Yet again, recommendation number 2 of what not to do: don't ignore your intuition, because I did this for that 2 whole year span when I got back with my ex-boyfriend. And just so much pain and emotion could have been avoided, but you go through what you go through, and here we are later talking about it on a top rated podcast, so it's fun. So I completely chose to ignore my intuition, and it wasn't until about the end of 2019 that I went through a huge shift and transformation, both in my physical world, both internally, everything else in between. And this was a real shake-up for me. This is actually how the podcast started. So for those of you who haven't listened, go all the way back to the first episode, and you'll put all the pieces together from that. But we are way beyond that, and we are 2 years later in the content. And anyway, backstory though, because this is about my spiritual journey. So, we're going to go back and forth in time. So then we are ending 2019, and I have shifted and I've changed and I've found a new version me, and I am thriving towards the end of 2019. I went through all that shit and I'm thriving, right? We enter 2020 and I'm still thriving. I'm still feeling great. I'm still dabbling more into spirituality. I'm uncovering it more. I'm meeting more people who are open to it. So I'm really doing what I can to immerse myself around like-minded people. Hence why we've got the society, how much like-minded people have just excelled and helped my growth and success. So then, of course, we enter the famous March of 2020, March, April, when all that stuff happens. And like a lot of the world, we get forced to go within, literally. Yeah, we're not working as much, but I realized that it had been maybe, a few months from the actual breakup. So we broke up end of 2019, went through that shit, started thriving, 2020, still thriving, didn't really deal with what was happening, came down to March, April, realized shit, I got some healing to do right now. So that's what we did, because I knew in my heart it was what I was supposed to do. And now this is where we're going to get quite woo, so get ready, guys. So as we entered this phase, I guess, of 2020, and I'm honestly like a sponge when it comes to different ways of embracing and being spiritual. I had so much trust in the universe. And pre-frame, we are the universe. We are direct reflections and mirrors of the universe. So I was cultivating self-trust. I was cultivating how to believe in myself. Hence, I was cultivating confidence. And this was the start of my confident journey, I guess you could say. Like, I never used to be like this. I had it within me because I was a drama kid. I used to go to drama school when I was a kid, like not even at school, like an outside school. I used to do performances every school holidays at the local theatre in Adelaide. Yeah, wow, that was a whole time ago. So I guess I've always had this little like theatrical thing within me. But anyway, complete side note. So I had discovered concepts such as twin flames, and I started to get more interested in tarot cards. I started to watch a lot of tarot card readings on YouTube, and I started to find connections that really sparked something within my soul, I want to say. They really made me curious, and I went through so many lessons from connections, from people, from friendships, from XYZ, whatever it may be. I went through so many lessons, but I just knew deep down that it's what I was supposed to do, because every time I would encounter a new lesson, I grew from it immensely. And the notes app on my phone became an absolute goldmine. And the more I did this work, the more I learned, the more I went within, the stronger my connection grew, essentially. Actually, I've realized I missed out a big part of the story here. And I've spoken about this so much, so you guys already know. End of 2019, right before the breakup, right before everything went to shit. Oh, this is like a little golden ticket here. I started to learn meditation. And I learned what is called transcendental meditation. And this is where you do it in silence. So there's no audio, there's no guidance, there's no voice. You get given a mantra. And a mantra is a sound. So it's not like a word like dog or cat where you can associate your dog or cat whenever you think or say the word. Instead, it's a sound where it's not found in the dictionary. So you're not going to be able to think of what it is. And I learned meditation. I went to a course and I learned meditation about 3 days before my ex and I broke up. And I seriously owe so much of my healing and my strength to meditation. Like, it actually makes me emotional in the best way possible. And that is how passionate I am about meditation. And side note as well, I've just received an email this morning about a huge collaboration I'm going to be doing with a brand to do with meditation. And when I got that email, when I got the opportunity, a few tears were shed of happiness, because this just shows my strength and my commitment and my passion to what I do, particularly meditation. And it's now getting me to share my meditation on this national company, and it's just, I can't put in it. Yeah, I'm speechless. It's going to be enormous for the brand. Side note, but I learned meditation, and that is how I was able to really strengthen so much, strengthen my stillness, strengthen my connection to myself, to my intuition, to my higher self. And then, now we'll come back to 2020 where I was, and I discovered things like I mentioned twin flames and tarot cards and shadow sides and all this kind of stuff. And I was meditating consistently. I was meditating twice a day for 20 minutes. And I can't even begin to explain the magic and the wisdom and the words that came to me while I meditated. And I've got probably more journals than books in my office. I honestly have a journal everywhere, like in my car, next to my bed, on my desk, in my kitchen, like anywhere I'm ever chilling or living, I have a journal nearby, because what goes on in my mind, I need to get out. And that is how I share. That is how I get so much insight. That's where so much of my content comes from. That's where so much of me comes from, right? It's from my meditation practice. It's what comes through to me. And I just knew deep down in my soul, like in the deepest part of my being, that I had a specific purpose to fulfill. And so much of that involved speaking my truth, sharing my voice, being online, being a guide, being a leader, being a teacher. I started to uncover that is why why I'm here, yes. I mean, we're all here to live life, but that is a big part of my mission. And I get so many glimpses of visions and connections and divine downloads, and it just gets stronger and stronger as we go. Like, now that I'm really reflecting back to 2020, it was so basic and so surface, but I was just such an open, curious sponge, and that is how we are going to go forward in life. There is nothing worse than a know-it-all, to somebody who always needs to have the answers to things, who always needs to butt in and not let other people speak. There is so much power in sitting back and observing. Asking questions, yes, but not needing to be a know-it-all. Like, the person who thinks they need to know it all is the person who is speaking the most. Like, you know, when you're in a room with people or a classroom or workplace, or it doesn't matter what the situation is, and there's somebody who just needs to be that know-it-all person, like, that person actually doesn't know jack shit, right? Instead, the person who maybe knows it the more, like, who the fuck cares who knows the most? But the thing is, the person who is that is silent, and they're observing and they're being calm. And that is like beyond potent. That is beyond powerful. And I started to really uncover that this is how I wanted to be. And this is why we have the podcast. So I can offload and share my insights in an intimate space with thousands of you guys listening to the podcast, right? But when I am in settings and situations and social events, I'm not there like center of attention yapping on XYZ. Like, actually, if you meet me, if you know me in real life, or if you're going to meet me soon or whatever it may be, like, not that I'm shy, but I'm just more laid back. Like, I'm really just laid back and observing and watching. And like, I would, like, if someone sits next to me and I start to get to know them, like, I'll open up and you'll see my quirky side soon enough. But I don't put that up on a front straight away because there's simply no need to, right? Like, so that's just like a side note there. And that's something that I shared that for a reason, because we're going to kind of come back to that. We're kind of going to come back to that as we jump into how I'm feeling now in 2022. So 2020 became more connected, was so open to learning more. And I started to work through so many of my feelings and my emotions, particularly with my healing, like I mentioned. So healing myself from my breakup. And, you know, we've all gone through a breakup. We've all gone through maybe a breakup from a friend or something else that's similar. And there's emotions there that we need to face. Otherwise, they show up later. And I think it's so important to go through all this type of stuff. Like, my friend and I we have this analogy where me and her are quite similar, where, you know, she went through a breakup as well, and we were just sharing that, you know, we both went through ours, like, straight through the guts. Like, we're not trying to bypass or find somebody else to, you know, cover the surface or not be upfront with our feelings. And I know everybody is so, so different, and, you know, everyone's just different, like, straight up. I don't need to justify that. But the point is, I had this knowing deep down that I had to work through all those feelings for a reason. And the knowledge and the wisdom that I learned, truly, I feel is priceless. It's something that I haven't read in a self-development book before. And when you can make peace and when you can create your own knowings and understandings, when you are physically piecing that together, that is where you're going to see the change, because it has come from yourself. It hasn't come from a coach or a podcast or a self-development book or anything else. It's come from yourself. Therefore, you are like 90% more likely to remember it and to act on it. And that is where the power lies, because it's come from within. And you're cultivating this self-trust, this self-belief, this self-confidence. And when you have confidence, oh my God, can you do anything? There is no way I could do what I do if I was not confident. And let me tell you, the biggest and the best thing I've manifested is confidence. It's something that isn't in the physical world. It's not a certain handbag or a certain dollar value in my bank account. It's probably my favorite personality trait about myself, confidence. And when you have that, you will just go as far as you allow yourself to go, which will be so far because you're confident and you believe in yourself. And that is powerful. And I knew by doing this work, I was increasing my confidence because I was listening to myself. I was building my own faith and my own trust. I was believing in the universe, which, as I shared, is simply a reflection of who we are, right? So essentially, I just started to feel so connected. I knew there was so much more out there, higher intelligence, universe, spirit, intuition. I knew it in 2019, 2017, 18, and now I started to feel it in 2020. I was tapping into that. The more I meditated, the more I strengthened that, the more, I'm just trying to think how I can articulate this feeling, but it's like I almost saw this character, I'm going to say, is my intuition, which is myself, right? This character. And whenever I needed to know an answer, I wanted to know an answer, I would, when I would meditate, that would be my intention to figure it out. And I would tap into that feeling, and the downloads I would get, as an example, would be things to say or things to do or motions to take or risks to take or bold action steps to take, something that is going to propel me forward and something that is going to help me learn. Maybe I'm not failing, maybe I'm falling, but we're confident, we are strengthening confidence to being okay with falling, because I would so much rather fall, pick myself up and be in a whole new reality opposed to being somebody who is just way too scared to even take a step just in case they fall because they're too scared what people are going to think of them. Whereas if you have this confidence, you can be like, I'm going to take a step. I'm going to fall. That's okay. I believe myself. I know that I can keep on going, right? And that's why you're listening to this podcast, because I'm going to call it, you are that person who you want to learn, you want to grow. You are confident, you want to create more confidence. There's always room to improve, right? So my connection just completely strengthened, and I just felt I had fallen back in love with myself. I had become my own best friend all over again. And that is when so much in my life started to change. So much. And I started to see it in my inside world to begin with. And then, of course, like everything, we have the ripple effect. It ripples on into our physical world. And the first evidence, I guess you could say, was in the connections around me. Connection is, I'm going to say it's my number one value. I mean, the Facebook group. Shout out to the society. You guys listening to my podcast, my friends, everything else in between. Connection is so important and dear to me. So, of course, I started to see this ripple out in my connections. And so now we are in 2021. So this was a year for me. This was a fucking weird year for me, to be honest. I had to completely release control in so many areas of my life. And I started to see the effects work in my favor instantly, as soon as I could drop and release this control. Now, here's a story. The end of 2020, I resigned from my job I had at the time with no job lined up. For so many reasons, I had to leave that job. It just wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't serving me. I'd outgrown it. It just was completely out of alignment with me. And I had this inkling, I had this urge, this desire that although I didn't have something lined up, it's what I was supposed to do. And I was surprised to have so much support around me. My friends, my family, they all knew that I was having trouble at this workplace, and they all supported this decision, and that made it 10 times easier. Although entering into unknown territory with no stable income when we're so used to that was so challenging. So I resigned and I stepped out into this unknown, and I had to fully release control. And I spent 2 and a bit months with no job. I had savings. It was summer. I was living my best life. I was doing all the things I do best. I had the podcast up and running. I realized I wanted to be a coach. I realized that was the career I wanted. And so I started to get more curious into this world. I reached out to Carlo, which is actually how Carlo and I met. He was my mentor back in the day. So I did, I think, about 3 or so months coaching with him, and he really helped me blossom so much. And then fast forward a year later, and I'm his business partner. So from student to business partner, how cool is that? I started to realize it was stability I was craving. And this is where my spiritual practice got so much deeper. So I'm like, okay, I want stability in the physical world. How and where can I create stability in my inside world? So in my health, in my spiritual awareness, in my mindset. And I really started to tap in and realize I need to have more fun. I need to be more open. And I need to put in the action. And this is when, on reflection as well, this is where my manifesting abilities, I'm going to call them, completely accelerated. And it was the start of 2021 still, and no job. And I realized maybe I do want a job, like I thought, I realized I wanted to be a coach, but I know we shouldn't say we're not ready, but I had this inkling being like, I think there's just a little bit more work I need to do, like actually get more money type work. And so this is like wild. I put it out there that I wanted to get a job, that I wanted a job in marketing as a social media manager. And I declared what I was no longer available for. I declared I was no longer available for not having a consistent income. And I declared a whole bunch of other things. And I got super crystal clear on what I wanted my job to be like. And I was ridiculous with what I wanted. I wanted it to be less than a 10-minute drive from my house. I wanted to have underground car parking. I wanted to have a fun young team and a whole bunch of other random stuff that was just so, privileged and just so ridiculous and like so, you sound so spoiled saying this. Hear me out, guys. And then I started looking online. I was like, there's nothing here. I got disheartened. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll get a casual job just to get me by. So I applied for a casual job and I got rejected because they said I was too qualified. So I was like, yeah, sick. So anyway, fast forward 7 days after I had written that letter of what it is I was no longer available for and what I wanted in that job, I got messaged by someone on LinkedIn to offer me a job that ticked every single one of those boxes. And this was for a coaching business based here in Adelaide. So joining the marketing team for the coaching business. And it was less than a 10-minute drive from my house. I had underground car parking and the team was extremely fun and young. And that was just a real did that just happen moment? And this is where I realized that 1, our words are powerful, and 2, I'm kind of powerful as well. And I realized I have this ability. I mean, we all have this ability, but it just started to get stronger. And the things I started to manifest just became, I want to say, more and more epic. And so I have a whole story in this, on this whole job manifesting thing as well, because the ending is pretty, horrible, but, I manifested this incredible opportunity. Didn't work out as we wanted in the end, but I fell over, I learnt, I picked myself back up. So this is where I really started to have fun. And I really started to have fun in a sense of believing in myself and trusting in myself even more. I was releasing control as much as I could. And a whole bunch of life lessons I went through in that year, in 2021. Yet again, learning so much about myself. I really decided to scrape the surface of how much more I had to learn about myself and how many more lessons there were to be uncovered. But yet again, on reflection and even how I was feeling in that moment, coming back to why I know I do what I do. I know I'm here to serve a purpose and to guide and to lead and to teach others, right? But I can only be and do that if I am able to face myself and XYZ as much as I can. So then we get towards the end of 2021. I've left that job, and Carlo's a big character at the moment. Carlo comes back into my life. We've finished one-on-one at the start of the year, and he has his program, and he comes to me and hires me to be a mentor in his program. And I just left my job. I closed one door. Didn't have another job lined up because that just seems to be what I do. You know what? Maybe I do advise it, because the way I look at it is one door closes, another opens. And not that I thrive under pressure, because I definitely don't. But I find when you have this deep knowing that you can trust yourself and that you know things are going to work out, I know this isn't for everybody, but when you have that knowing, you can walk away from things that no longer serve you, stepping into unknown territory, taking that, what people would see as a risk. I mean, it is a risk, right? Trusting and knowing that it's going to work out in your favor. So I had to leave this job. I was at that job for 6 months. It was a very toxic, yucky workplace. That's why I had to leave. I didn't want to get into it, but there's a whole episode about it as well. I'll link it in the show notes of this podcast as well. So I was there at that job for 6 months. I learned a lot. I made great friends. I learned so much about how to run a coaching business. So to see how this was so divinely put into my life, I was working on a marketing team, and this coaching business was making so much money, like a ridiculous amount of money. So I was essentially seeing the back end of how the marketing works for a coaching business, right? So like, it makes sense for me to get given the opportunity based on where I am and what it is I'm building, what I'm creating. So I learnt as much as I could in that 6 months. And then I left along with the whole other team, along with everybody else. And I realized I just had a bucket load of knowledge and information that I would not have known if I had not had that position to be on the marketing team for another huge coaching business. So I stepped away from that position, and I knew in my heart, in my soul, now was my time. And so, of course, because things don't always work out perfectly, I leave that job and I am doing freelance marketing to get me by. And then a few months later, this is when Carlo comes to me about the mentor position. And this is my step in the door, right? I've never coached before this point. And he gives me this opportunity. I get to go through his program. I get to be guided. I get to see how to be this coach, how to be this mentor, how to hold the space, how to ask the questions, X, Y, Z. And I get to be in this program where it's all done for me, all the back end stuff. I just get to slide in, present my coach face, and do the work as well. And so this was quite possibly the best stepping stone ever. And this is when, of course, all the shadow work started. So this was about 12 months ago as I'm recording this. This was around October, November last year in 2021. And I remember so clearly the amount of shadow sides I had to face. And what I mean by this is, there's light and dark to everything. And when something isn't working out for us, there's a reason behind all of that. And it's how deep we want to go as to how deep we're going to find those answers. And what's that saying? Like, somebody can only love you as much as they love themselves. Like, it's the same with coaching. It's the same with any type of person who does some kind of similarity to what I'm doing right now. Like, we can only go as deep and we can only share as intimate stories or wisdom or knowledge as much and as willing we are to find that within ourselves. And because I knew in my heart that this is the path for me, I was faced all these, they weren't even challenges, but I was faced all these opportunities and times to really face, I guess, my demons, you could call it. And, not that there were that many, but like what I'm saying is to go through the work that the average person doesn't really do. And the amount of work on my self-worth I did is like, blows my mind. And the thing is, we're never fully done, especially with self-worth. Self-worth comes up in so many ways, in love, in friendships, in jobs, in money, in attracting things, in being a certain person. It all comes down to your self-worth. And more times than not, we are unaware of that. Because if we were aware, we would change the story. We would change the situation. We would put the boundaries up and get the blocks out the way. But because we are not aware, it's actually self-worth that's getting in our way, we're never going to get to the other end. And so I was forced essentially to go through this journey, forced by myself, to uncover so many blocks and so many boundaries I had to put in place and so many and so many self-worth things, essentially. I needed to up level, increase in my life. And I remember as well, I reckon I shared this story quite a few times. It was in the program. So this was the program I was mentoring with Carlo, and we had a guest breathwork facilitator come in one session, and he took the whole group through a breathwork session. And I had done, a handful of my Wim Hof practices, nothing too crazy. And I'm like, oh, this is just like meditation. It'll be fine. Like, I do this all the time. No big deal. Side note, never be a know-it-all. Never think you're too good for things, because not that I thought that, but I just did not know what I was about to get myself into. And so, me and my were all on Zoom, and Steve, the guy who's taken us through breathwork, he starts this practice, and, we're laying down on our beds, you can see everyone's little like camera box, we're all laying down, and he's taking us through what to do. And the release and the experience I went through was so profound. I had to just take a moment after the whole session. I remember like turning my phone off, and I just had to be and process everything that came up. And it was all to do with self-worth. And it was the most beautiful release I've ever had. It was like probably the first biggest release I've ever had. And I remember so clearly talking to Carla the next day and just being like, I was just not prepared for that. Like, I did not think that would happen. And for anyone who's done breath work and who's had such powerful sessions and powerful moments with them, with breath work, the wisdom and the profound experiences you have is something, I just don't know how else you can get that. And the reason you experience this is because essentially my understanding is it's trauma trapped within our bodies that we are completely unaware about. And by doing breath work, we are essentially recalibrating our nervous system. So we are allowing the flow of oxygen to go through our nervous system to recalibrate, to re-energize, to refresh. And any blocked trauma that's there that we have no idea it's there because it's suppressed deep within our subconscious. And by doing this breath work, any type of breath work, obviously the stronger, the bigger the release. And this was clearly my experience this time. And it was just so deep and heavy that it's like it flushes it all out, right? And emotions is just energy in motion. And I've always been quite emotional, not in a bad way at all. For my star sign lovers out there, I'm a Cancer moon. I'm a Sag sun and rising, so fire, passion, adventure, curiosity around me. And then a Cancer moon, which is so emotional, which is so in touch, which is wears your heart on your sleeve. Like that's me on the podcast, right? So I've always had that emotional side within me, and I've learnt to, I guess, release control of my emotions, but also use them to my advantage. Like, I hate when people think being sensitive is bad, or it's like an insult to say you're too emotional. Like, that is just the most insensitive, uneducated, that's the most insensitive, uneducated comment you could say to somebody, because it's not a bad thing at all. And in fact, I think it's beautiful when people can express and experience their emotions. And I think it's kind of robotic when they can't. And so, of course, emotions are going to arise when you go through such an experience like breath work, especially with me. It was like essentially my first time doing it properly, I'm going to say. So that was next level, whoa, what is going on here? And that was the start of a journey that I had no idea I was about to start. And as we are at the end of 2022, as I'm recording this, oh my God, the evolution, the evolvement I have gone through this year is something I never knew I would experience. It makes me emotional in a good way, I want to say, because it is just shaking me to my core to get to who and to where I am right now. And that is because coming back to how I was feeling in, 2020, as I shared, I had this deep knowing. It's like I made this commitment to myself, to my higher self, to my intuition, to the universe, to spirit. I made this connection, and I'm continuing to strengthen this connection with the universe every single day. And the reason how and why I am where I am, and so many people look at, for example, people who've done things they want to do, or even like with me, like I get opportunities left, right, and center. I do. And people think, oh, you're just lucky. It's hard work, and it's faith and belief in yourself. And pairing these two together, people are going to deem it as lucky. Yes. I mean, yeah, I'm lucky. I'm positive. I'm lucky. I'm optimistic. Of course I'm going to get these things come to me. It's my mindset. It's my mind shift, right? This is what I teach so many of my clients. It's how you think about yourself that people are going to then reflect that back to you. Like it's a mirror. It's a two-way street. We're not living in this one-dimensional world. Like what we are and what we do is going to be reflected back to us. Like, you know that Justin Timberlake song, what goes around comes around? Like if you're a shit person to somebody is most likely going to be a shit person to you, right? So it's this evolution, it's this flow, this ebb and flow. So I was about to embark on a journey that I couldn't prepare for, because if you prepared for it, you're never going to want to do it. I had no idea what I was about to step into. And as we ended 2021 and I turned 25, oh my God, shout out to my friends who really just were my rocks. When I turned 25, the first, I want to say 4 to 6 months were probably the hardest and the worst of my life. In the best way possible, I'm going to say. I was just so confused with what to do with myself, with what to do with my life, with where to go, with who to be, with where to live, with what to say, with what to do. As if that was the start of this year. It was so overwhelming. Actually, I speak to a lot of people who have turned 25 and they experience this. So for anyone who is 25 or is about to, or if you're experiencing weird times at all, just know it's so normal. Essentially, I guess, quarter life crisis, because we're all gonna live to 100. It's so normal to be so confused and to doubt yourself. And maybe you're like, no, I'm not doubting. I'm not comparing myself, but we're most likely doing it at a subconscious level. And that's kind of when it's the worst, because we don't realize we're doing it. And this is me all the time as well. So it's okay. You will get through it. My advice is just to remain open and remain curious, and ask yourself why you want the things that other people have, and ask yourself, what is it that you want, right? Because it's so easy to follow the crowd and to be a sheep and to do the things that we think we're supposed to do. And to go against the crowd and to be the black sheep and to not do what everybody else is doing is fucking terrifying and really fucking hard as well, if I'm being perfectly honest. But you get better at it, as you do with everything. It's a practice. You're strengthening it. And the way you're going to get there is by strengthening your spiritual practice, by strengthening how close you are to yourself, to your desires, how much you want to tap in, how much you choose to be connected, and how much you choose to be open. And we are going to do a part 2, so I can really shine a light on 2022, because that deserves a whole episode in itself. Because the evolvement and the shifts I've gone through this year are second to none. And I feel like I hope I don't go through it again next year, because I am sick of constantly evolving. Not that it's a bad thing, but I just want my life to be nice for a bit. It's just, there's always ups and downs, and don't get me wrong, guys, it's never horrible things at all. I truly recognize, and I know I'm so grateful for my life. It's more so internal evolvement I go through, and there's always a new shift, and I'm constantly, this year, I've constantly been quantum leaping, which is great, but it's exhausting as well, spiritually exhausting. I'm also want to say my energy and my health has never been better, to be honest. I really prioritize that, but it's, my spiritual energy, my bandwidth, it's a lot. So we're going to leave a whole entire episode in 2022. I'm going to make this a 2-part series. So I hope you enjoyed this style of episode, this storytelling flow of episode. I really hope you could follow through easily. I hope I really articulated the story the best I could, going from that transition from when I first discovered the law of attraction to where we ended up, which was the end of 2021, the start of 2022. So guys, if you enjoyed this style of episode, please let me know. My DMs are always open for a chat, guys. As always as well, I love it when you take a screenshot of this episode and share it to your Instagram stories. I love to know what episode you're listening to when, maybe if it's on your walk with your dog, you're at the beach, you're driving, whatever it is that you are. I love to know that. So please guys, make sure you screenshot, and you can also tag me as well at Isabel Prestia. Also our podcast account is startsomewhere.podcast. If you're not following us on Instagram, be sure to. We have a bunch of educational and empowering and inspirational and motivating content going up weekly. I am going to love you and leave you right there. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever it is that you decide to listen to this podcast. I appreciate you so much for listening to Start Somewhere and for supporting our journey. I will see you in part 2 of the episode. Bye guys.